Hey everybody, welcome to another essential conversation here at Wellbeings, and we have Dr. Alex back again with us, and today we're going to talk about relational struggles. Again, there's plenty of them, and if we can isolate them or notice them, and we can keep the love coming. So, but before I start, I would love to share something that I read this week that I wanted to bring into our session to see what you think, Doc.
Okay.
It comes from Jody Mitchell. She's come out of retirement. So I actually thought she had passed away, but it's great she's still alive.
No, she's of course not.
And she's talking about an article that was wrote in Esquire magazine not so long ago. The article was called "The End of Sex," and it said if you want endless repetition, see a lot of different people. If you want infinite variety, stay with one person. And they said here, what happens is when you date, you run all your best moves and all your best stories when you're dating. And in a way, that routine and method is like you're falling in love with yourself over and over again.
That's great.
And you can't do that with a long-term mate because he knows all of your old material within a long relationship. Things die and get rekindled. And that shared process of rebirth deepens the love. It's hard work though, and a lot of people run at the first sight of trouble. You're with this person, and suddenly you look like an asshole to them, or they look like an asshole to you, and it's unpleasant. But if you can get through it, you get closer, and you learn a way of loving that's different from the neurotic love enshrined in the movies that we all see. It's warmer and you have more padding. And that was her understanding, because she talked about that she was so lucky to find love at a stage in her life that's still blossoming.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I was really taken by, well, we know she's a great story songwriter, but there was just something about the simplicity of what she was able to notice through her own lived experience.
Yeah.
You know, and this comes off a chat to a friend of a friend's, and it was about this thing about, yeah, you know, I can't get away with what I would get away with when I'm dating, and there's something that was, and they thought there was something wrong with that you should be able to keep up with the stories.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so let's enter in here to talk about, you know, just the difference between dating and intimacy, acquiring affection trophies versus developing deep intimacy. What do you see in your office in relation to this journey from dating to intimacy?
Well, I think I want to go back to the first words of that statement you read, because it almost would seem counterintuitive. She says, if you want endless variety, what is, read that first, just the first sentence again.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. She took us out of Esquire magazine,
right.
and yeah, so it said the name of the article was "The End of Sex," and it said that, and she said this stuck. If you want endless repetition, see a lot of different people.
Okay, so let's stop there, because we would think that endless repetition would be in a long-term committed relationship, and that endless variety would be in seeing a lot of different people. So this writer flipped this on its head and said, endless repetition is just meeting yourself and your moves and your rote way of being and your superficial defensiveness over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Right? But if you want endless variety, what's the rest of the sentence or the next?
Yeah, well, you choose a partner, and it says then just that you pretty much, you
There was a second sentence right after that.
Yeah, so you get, if you want endless repetition, see a lot of different people. If you want infinite variety, stay with one.
Great. I mean, that's a beautiful short sentence, and it says a lot. If you want infinite variety, stay with one. And so when we consider that a long-term committed relationship is an opportunity and an invitation for us to keep meeting ourselves anew and keep meeting our partners anew, then we can see the profound wisdom in that very short sentence.
Yeah.
And the other is reductive and rote and just a complete repetition of what we already know. And there's something inherently narcissistic in that, right?
Well, I think it's a big struggle in the world, and in the world of relationship, is this sort of pull back to the familiar dullness
Mm-hmm.
versus to jump into the rainbow, to
Yeah.
jump the edge, to dare to be enlivened, to dare to be in the unknown of the mystery, the mystery itself, whatever way we want to put it or attach it, whether it's, I talked about it this week in our men's work. Without mystery, we're almost half dead already,
Yeah.
and trying to explain what that meant to men who thought mysteries and myths were untruths, as opposed to the original understanding of myth, which is real. It is truth. It's a real truth that comes in story form.
It is. And it's how we, myth historically is how we've conceptualized reality in a way that is universal. And so this vulnerability of ourselves to ourselves and getting out of self-deception first and foremost is crucial to that experience of novelty, of the unknown is what you're talking about. I don't know myself fully ever. And so how can I ever fully know my partner? When I think I fully know my partner, I'm reducing him to the lowest common denominator of what I arrogantly think I already know, as opposed to discovering who he's becoming, just as I discover who I'm becoming, with each passing day, year, decade.
Yeah, I was, I don't normally answer questions like this, but I was put on the spot the other day in a
I
group,
see.
and the answer was, Nigel, can you explain to me what love is
Mm,
in a romantic relationship,
I see.
right? And I scratched the old head a little bit for a while, and I said, I don't know, but maybe this could be something near what it could be. It's, this idea that if I can love your ordinary worst parts better than you, there's an atmosphere that's there where I'm not trying to change you,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm on with the ordinary worst parts. And how to do that is for me to learn to love my own.
Oh, that's beautiful, Nigel. That's quite
And
poetic.
well, it's like, and then she says, well, what are your ordinary worst parts? And I said, well, let's talk
That's my
about
partner.
and what does it mean, like an ordinary worst part? And and it's really my whole idea here was about really how to. It was like another expansion on self-acceptance and accepting the other, because so much of the struggles is I want to change them. If only Johnny would, if he would change his ways, then the marriage would be better. If he, and maybe in some cases that could be true, but a lot of the time I hear this about 6 times this week in groups and in one-to-one therapy. I went into the relationship hoping I would change him.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Another woman says, the man says, you're not really that attractive. You're not really what I'm looking for. So the woman heard the despair in that, and like a child, then you respond with a defiance inside, and she says, well, I'll show you. I'll be beautiful. And they spent 3 years in pain and suffering, or trying to prove to him, losing weight,
Right.
trying to be, so this sort of dynamic. So as you were starting to, you started to kindle sort of that flame in me as you started to introduce that piece there. And what is it, in relationships, this idea of love? I think there's not enough information about what to expect from the other. I think there's a lot of demands. Do you see that often in your like young child demands on the partners to be something other than or godlike?
Yes, well, I think a lot of people go into their relationships and they're playing out their family of origin dynamics. So whatever they saw as a model for relationship is what they do, consciously and unconsciously, not even knowing. Most people say, I don't want to be like my mother or my father. And it's inescapable, honestly, unless you're really examining the patterns that you grew up with. And people do get into relationship for incredibly immature and wrong reasons. They marry people they don't really know because they just want to be married. Or they marry people they're not really attracted to because they think she would make a good mother. Just all these compromises, and or she'll marry him because he has the potential to be X, Y, or Z. And falling in love with potential is a very dangerous proposition. The question is, can you live with who this person is today? Do you like them enough today? Do you have enough in common? Is there companionship? Do you have a sex life that you're enjoying? Or are you, this happens a lot too. A lot of people, often women, are just enduring the sex. And then once they're in the marriage or the relationship, it turns out they don't really like sex that much. Or they have a sexual abuse history that they have not attended to yet. And so we're really kind of selling each other a bill of goods. We're not honest with ourselves first, because you have to engage in self-deception before you can deceive another.
Exactly, and this is a big theme since we spoke last, over the last month. That's coming up in the groups and in a lot in the groups, and this is about dishonesty in the relationship, and you just named it there. And then how, like, the foundation, and again, I'm talking about like romantic in long-term relationships. If there's no trust, which dishonesty trying to eats away at,
Right.
there's not much. It starts to get very wobbly after a while. And communication, seeing a therapist, like this sort of standard things we would imagine. But what would you have a couple start to think about if dishonesty is a theme in their relationship?
Well, are we talking about, each person's self-deception, or flat out lying and betrayal when you say dishonesty? Because there are many versions of dishonesty.
I think it's a full spectrum, because we got all of it there. I think we could speak about the self-deception, and then also about the blatantly lying and all the things that go with that.
Well, look, I think we're all dishonest to an extent because we don't really know who we are until we're figuring out who we are as we go along. But lying by omission, meaning but you're not saying, or blatantly lying and gaslighting, that's at the extreme. But this is where this author is talking about infinite variety, what I would call novelty. It comes from honesty, from vulnerability of being honest, which is, today I'm not sure I want to be married to you anymore. I think about ditching everything and going to, live in the Greek islands for a summer and seeing what happens to me. Now, the chances of me doing that are slim, but if I can't talk to you about what my fantasy is in life, or how I sometimes worry that this isn't right, or that I'm holding you back even, because I have limitations. Let's say I have a chronic illness and you're someone who likes to climb mountains and you don't because I'm homesick. That can create a whole mess between two people, as opposed to, let's talk about the pain of my, limitations and your desire to go. And are we able to negotiate that or not? And just the act of talking about it can bring forward a lot of grief and pain and dreams that were dashed. But in the act of talking about it, there's a connection that starts to occur that's different. But
That's it.
right, but the things we're most afraid to say are the things that we must talk about, and that requires courage, a real, act of the heart. Because people will also say, well, I don't want to hurt my partner. But the truth is, by lying by omission, by not being honest about what's true for you, you are implicitly hurting them. And that's a different hurt than an explicit hurt, because if you tell me explicitly, it might hurt, but at least you're not playing God with my life. At least I get to make decisions now about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I hear we share this in the groups a lot, and what often comes back sometimes is just this. It comes back in one of two ways often, and one is that feels like the scariest thing in the world to talk about something like that to my partner, and then the other one is my partner's going to respond like a child.
Right.
It's not going to be safe for me to go there. I know I have to go there, but it's just going to get so messy because they can't hear it as a wondering. They can't hear it as this is a part of me. It's not all of me. It's like this sort of foundation that I hear that's needed, that can cultivate the flowering of what you're suggesting, Doc.
Right.
And how can we build that soil to have that flowering, to allow that cross-pollination of shared truth from all parts of us, the shadow parts and
Right. Well, this does take, two people that are mature enough that can hold their prefrontal cortex or their thinking brain online and not go into a regressed state. And so not everybody has that capacity, but I would suggest that people take a step back. In LA, I would use a cinematic metaphor, which is, cameras are either in long shot or extreme close-up. So rather than being in an extreme close-up, you want to pull the camera back and get into a long shot and let's talk about our talking. Let's talk about how we're going to talk about difficult issues. So what do you need for me to be able to talk out loud or think about things in order to feel safe? And if I say something that feels threatening to you, how can you let me know that without starting to blame and shame me or start to disappear on me, so that now I have to caretake to you or chase after you because you're dissolving into a puddle crying or you're screaming or you're storming out the door? So do you see how having a conversation about how we're going to talk is much more important than the contents of the conversation? So that means, well, I might say to you, well, I need to sit knee to knee. So we're close in, right? That we're not walking around the kitchen talking. Somebody's got their back to somebody. That's when things really get out of hand. But when we're sitting knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball, maybe even holding hands, while we're talking about these difficult things, there's a sense of connection, attachment. Also, do we have an agreement that nobody leaves and that we're not going to threaten the relationship? Nobody's going to threaten divorce or threaten breaking up, because again, that's a sort of childish low blow move.
It's manipulation.
It's manipulation, right? Can we agree to not interrupt each other? So what are the ground rules for our having a conversation? Because, Stan Tatkin talks about secure functioning. And secure functioning in a relationship is not about secure attachment. It's about we have agreements that we stick to, and we do not violate those agreements as a couple. So I have your back, you have my back. So one of those rules would be we don't ever use the divorce word unless we're done and we're divorcing. You don't threaten that. As I said, you don't go storming out the door. You don't name call. You don't fight below the belt. You hold on to a functional adult part of yourself, and you can say stop, or I need you to slow down, or I'm getting really scared right now. When you, Nigel, say you want to have sex with aliens, where does that leave me? That makes me feel like you don't love me. And you're saying, it's not that I don't love you. It's just I have this fantasy sometimes and I want to tell you about it. that's very different, right? Like, oh my God, you're leaving me. I'm not sexy enough. I'm not attractive. You don't love me. Like, I start to collapse down into my own victim story or my own childhood trauma issues. And then I lay that on you.
Wow. I love that. That's what's the name of that guys? What's his name?
Stan Tatkin. He is a very well-known American couples therapist. He wrote, his first book was called Wired for Love. And he's also got a book called Wired for Dating. He's got a number of books out. He also has one called We Do. So what it means to be in a securely functioning coupleship. And he says we're in each other's care. We're in each other's care. So how do we, because we always need parenting, we always need attachment, we always need to feel connected to each other. And anything we do to threaten that connection is out of bounds, essentially.
Wow. That's so powerful. I love that. I want to come back around to that again. It's something that's jumping out that seems to be a huge thing. We haven't covered it yet in our work. You know, and it's, you know, it's in these, it's, and it seems to be, I looked at in America, I looked at in the UK, and it seems to be up there with the main sort of struggles that really impact the sort of a healthy sex life in a long-term romantic relationship, and that is struggles to do with money.
Mm-hmm.
So many young couples are getting married and are going into marriage with huge debt, you know, and
Right.
this Walt Disney wedding, and
Yeah.
starts off the journey into the rest of their life with so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And we can look at that in itself, the pressure to have that big day, and the price of that, and who's it really for anyway. But yeah, do you see this often as a struggle that comes in, and what advice would you have for people who are struggling in that way?
Well, I think money is a huge issue, just like sex, and it has to do with entitlement and deprivation. And most people are not taught about money in their childhoods. It's a thing that nobody talks about. Kids never know if they have enough of it or not enough of it. They hear arguments about it. And it's a real source of shame. It's amazing how many people are as ashamed to talk about money as they are about sex. Like, it's a dirty topic. It's a topic that's loaded with shame. So I think when people are dating, it's a conversation that they have to have with each other, which is, what is your relationship with money? You know, do you under earn, or are you a workaholic? Are you obsessed with money and you don't have it, or are you obsessed with it and you hoard it? Or do you just, earn it, but you can't get rid of it fast enough? Because what does it actually mean to you? So getting people to clean up their debt before they marry and have agreements again. It's like parenting. How are we going to parent this child? Nobody talks about that. They just get pregnant. Right?
Yeah.
How are we going to run our finances? What are we going to do and what is our ethos about saving? And most people do not have an ethos for, short-term deprivation for long-term satisfaction, especially with, the United States leading the way in consumerism.
Yeah, quick fixes.
Yeah, quick fix, buy now, pay later. It's super addictive, as opposed to, you're going to drive that car till it falls apart. You're going to know your mechanic really well, because you are not going to be blowing money on, buying fancy cars that you can't really afford. And you're going to live in an apartment, maybe start to live below your means, not in a deprivation way, but in a way because you're saving 10% of your income because you have a goal to buy a house, right? And if you really want to buy a house or have a child, you should not be in debt, and you should start to save 10% of your income. But you can't save 10% of your income if you're in debt, because the interest rates are far higher than that now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems to be, whether they go into the marriage kind of struggling with debt, or in the marriage, they're not talking together as a couple about finances. They're not,
Right.
It's like, I got mine, you got yours, or one person spending a lot as another form of compensating or medicating.
Right.
And it's just, it gets out of control sometimes. And I think communication is what always seems to be what's missing there.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure there also for the person who's earning and the person who's spending, and a lot of resentment get kicked up around that. And for addicts, it's dangerous because that's what can have somebody drinking again or going out sexually, is that they've got so much resentment because their partner is not participating or they're not able to assert themselves in the money conversation. There's a woman here in the States also named Susan Orloff. I believe that's her name, Orloff. She's a money expert, and she's got a number of books on money and how to save. And, a lot of people now are starting to educate their children about money and getting checkbooks early on, and having to save their money to buy what they want. Because the other extreme of it is people that have wealth that give their kids whatever they want whenever they want it, and then they have no idea what it means to work for money. So it's a big conversation.
Yeah, this, it's you remind me of a client who came into group, and basically the mother did everything for the daughter, paid for everything. She never from quite an affluent family. And then did everything, and I mean, and told her not to go out, and the clubs were bad and dirty people hung out there, and you stay at home, and like basically almost like hostage, but not, but like,
Yeah.
and the daughter believed everything, and then she got married at the age of 22, and then I met her at 23 in therapy, and she didn't know how to live. She didn't know how to deal with money. She didn't know how to be with a man. She didn't know there was
Oh my gosh.
an arranged marriage as well.
Yeah.
So the dynamics, the struggles, the social, or sort of the cultural. This was an Indonesian woman from a wealthy family, so they often do that sort of keep you
Right.
a wealthy family. So it was a really it was a really difficult time for her, and it's still a difficult time,
Because you got all those cultural implications in there also. But the message is, because you're female, you don't have to do anything. You just have to look beautiful and be able to be a good hostess and a mother, and everything else will be taken care of. But there is just a big blindness in that.
there's a deadening there that
Yeah.
catches,
And
especially
crippling.
even there's like this sort of cross thing that I find, like when there's not proper education on whatever end of it in the relationship, is that there's a part of them that doesn't know what to do and is overwhelmed and anxious about that.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, wants to really be more than this sort of puppet, and or like a sort of dolly that is supposed to make a sound a certain way, dress a certain way, be a certain way. But yeah, so definitely, and then, but what I see coming out a lot of the time here with not just cultural dynamics in relationships, but money came up a lot. But there was this one other thing that came that stood out. Two incidences where they showed up in the group where they said, there's always a sacrifice when it comes to being in a long-term relationship. And this was women speaking predominantly here. And they were speaking that when they were in relationships before they got married, not dating, but they were in relationships, and the relationship was terrible in regards to, like, he was cheating, or he was not very kind, or he was emotionally unavailable, but the sex was good. And this came in a lot. It's like, that's sort of typical rock and roll guy where, he comes in and it's wild, it's passionate, it's the best thing, sliced bread, everything else is crap. Ends up like having to go into therapy afterwards, and then they come into a relationship and they get married, and seemingly most of the other things are fine, but then the sex is shit. And this is what I mean.
Well, I mean, look, that's a relationship with intensity, not intimate. It's not intimate at all. I mean, and that makes the female not much more available than the male she's choosing. If she's choosing bad boys because she likes the excitement, and the unpredictability of it and the intensity of it, that means that she's foregoing intimacy and close in quiet love for that sort of excitation, which is ultimately going to die. And at some point, she's even going to be disgusted with him because he's kind of a loser, or he doesn't show up, or he's irresponsible. And that's why the sex dies, because there's no relationship to the person. And so I'm always talking about, when I talk about love addiction, especially, that the relationship has to catch up with the sex. I mean, the sex is like rocket fuel right off the bat because of all of the neural chemicals that are involved in that sort of excitation. And it has us not focusing at all on who the person is. And so you're having all this, great torrid sex, and 2-3 months later you wake up and you're like, who's this person in my bed? I don't even like this person because I don't know them, right? You have no idea how they handle life, how they handle money, their family. Do they even have a family or friends? If somebody doesn't have family or friends, that's usually a really bad sign. So you don't know who you're sleeping with.
Yeah. It's like sometimes it can just be that sort of insulated sort of isolation where it's just sex,
Right.
and you see it, and that there's a lot of red cards going up then.
Sure. And then all your needs are coming to the surface and to the foreground, and your humanity, which you mentioned earlier about sort of basic humanity and worst flaws. But there's no way to negotiate any of that because you're not connected in that way. It's really, it's a crotch connection. It's not a heart connection.
Yeah, I like that. It's intensity, and it's the opposite. It's intensity you're chasing. It's not intimacy that you're looking for, and
Right.
development of that. And something I want to read out to you as well is from what that was like an important sort of thing from a psychoanalyst that I really enjoy, and she says, "Love does not ask for excitement, but sexuality depends on it. Love involves a hospitality towards another person. It means bringing them within your own boundaries. Sexual desire demands that these boundaries be broken down sometimes." And the tension between these two dynamics are sometimes not easy to be resolved.
Right.
Can you share a little bit about that? This it's almost like there's this sort of another way that I see this. It's almost like there's this wonderful loving and tenderness and sort of sensuality, and then there's this maybe even, and I'll use the word objective sex, like almost like the way that the child is to the breast of the mother, where it's an object of desire, and you go at it, and how to cut. Because I'm talking about this here because we talked about a moment ago about the woman seeking intensity versus intimacy. And I'm trying to display the two parts of that have been described here, which is loving, and then this other sort of more powerful sort of sexuality, this passion, and how to bring that in, and how to resolve these two forces that sometimes you have one without the other, and how to bring them together.
Well, I think that's the problem, is when you have one without the other, because I mean, she's saying in a beautiful way that love requires hospitality. When you think about hospitality, it's about welcoming somebody in to your house, to your heart, to your psyche, getting to know them. And I think this is especially true for women, and this might be a little bit, general, but I think when women feel safe and loved and respected, they're willing to drop those boundaries into the more carnal, the animalistic, the boundarylessness. But first, you have to have respect and consent, right? It would be like, having sex on your front lawn as opposed to your house, inside your house, right? If you're inside your house, you've got boundaries, and you can have sex on the dining room table or the pool table or the kitchen table. But if you don't have a house around you, you're not likely going to go have sex in your front yard. You feel too exposed. It's too dangerous. You could get arrested, or people could hurt you in some ways. So these boundaries are essential, and that's another, endless paradox in life, where it is always about holding both and tensions. Just like when I was talking earlier about, this connection and secure functioning, and taking care of each other, that's what the attachment requires. But we're also creatures that love our autonomy. So we have to hold the tension of attachment and autonomy simultaneously. It's like we love each other deeply and we want our space and we need our space. But that doesn't mean we're unhooking from each other in terms of our care. And so this can be another point of tension in relationships too, where, one person wants to go away for the weekend to, go hiking in the woods with their friends or to go to a spa with their friends. And the other party gets threatened somehow, as opposed to saying, go. I want to miss you. I want you to come home happy and feeling resourced and good about yourself also. So love becomes a freeing power, not a holding power, not this small, clingy, desperate need that's an unmet need from childhood.
I find that loving gets then sort of very symbiotic and sort of
Enmeshed. That's right.
Yeah. And and it's, and then definitely in my life I've went through different waves in where I would be, through my history of being a man, of being highly passionate or highly loving, and highly passionate and highly love, and then the art and the lifetime of work to be able to try to be able to bring both of them together, and to have that, to ignore, for example, that what you just said, but having that individualization, because for me, I'm all about homonymy in a way. It's like I want to, which is really about autonomy, helps give birth to bringing that to the group, to the others, and that's homonymy for me. And but it's so important that if I'm noticing I'm leaning towards a little bit too much of it's feeling like it's that hospitality sort of loving, tender, caring sensuality, then I'm realizing, okay, I'm needing a little bit of space, because I got to get that flame.
Exactly. And I think that there is a gender divide there also at the extremes. Some people are on different scales of heterosexuality, let's say, or masculinity, femininity. But I think if you are, for many men who are sort of solidly heterosexual, there are no gray areas. They really need that sort of testosterone, independent lone wolf recharge. There's only so much you can do being around women and children before you start to feel like, okay, I'm feeling very soft, suffocated. I got to get out. I got to go climb a mountain or ride a bike up a mountain or go canoeing across a lake or something, right? I've got to move the body somehow in a way that makes me feel vital and engaged so I can recharge.
Exactly. For me, it's like, it's so easy for me to be in that role. Like I could hold babies and women and nurturing, caring, and kind. Like I'm the mother, and if I don't take care of myself, then I then become a sort of controlling mother, or I become a smothered mother, or I become a masculine mother. And these are all my signs of where I haven't taken my time to get resourced really from the bottom up, which is from nature and other brothers, where I can be held and cry and dance and cook and be with them, and that's so essential. And, and again, for the viewers out here, like it's, and for the men and women both, like for the women who's always believing that you have to be tied to the kitchen and you have to stay at home, and just because your mom did that, like if you want to spice up the relationship, go off for a weekend with your girls somewhere. I'm not saying go party and look for other men. No, go and do something meaningful together. Do something that you haven't done. Go and play, but play in a way where it's creative or connective.
Right. I think that's really important also, because we can, as women, sort of beleaguer and behold ourselves to our families and our kids, and we put ourselves last. And then there's nothing left to give. It doesn't feel very sexy or feel very vital. So what do you do to make yourself feel good, sexy, alive, feminine? What do you need? Whether it's a women's circle, or a creative writing class, or going away to a dance workshop. Like, what lights you up internally? What recharges you? And so this is, I think, what we're talking about here, Nigel, is, asking all of us to put our attention on who we are and what we need, and take responsibility for ourselves. Like, do you bring yourself to your relationship like on empty? I'm bedraggled, I'm tired, I'm overworked, I'm miserable, make me feel better. It's like, gee, thanks. Or am I doing the things I need to do for self-care and rest so that I can come to you with a full tank, with something to give?
Mm. Yeah, it's like your flowers, which are beautiful over your shoulders. Like, do I come home wilted, or do I come in, kind of standing upright?
Right.
And I think we all sometimes are wilted a little bit,
Yeah.
And that's okay as well. But as you were talking there, Doc, I had this sort of beautiful I do this sometimes with my wife, and I probably could definitely do it more. But it's like, again, it's it's two ways, so it's not mothering my partner, but it's like really saying, okay, well, how can I support you? Okay, moving, like, I'm like, hey, how can I support you in charging up? How can I help you? How can I help you get nourished in some new way? Like, what would you like to do next weekend or this weekend that's just for you? How can we be partners that can support that partner who maybe struggles with maybe knowing that she needs to do that or he needs to do that, but let the other partner support that process of saying, how can I support you in you filling up your tank?
Especially when you have small children, or children, especially like under 12 as a mother, you don't want to leave them. You miss them. And so it's sort of saying, you know what, you need to go. I've got this. We'll be fine. We'll actually have fun together. And so that's a big part of it too, is when the mommy brain is on, it's on. It does not turn off, I think, until kids go to college. And even then.
My mother's 70 something, and it hasn't turned off yet.
Okay, she's still tracking you.
She says the same thing that my wife says. Well, you just don't understand. Mothers are mothers, and this
Right.
is what we do. And it's going to take a bit of time to challenge those old sort
Right,
of
assumptions.
hand me downs.
Yeah.
But no, that's really, really powerful. And I want to, one of the last subjects I want us to talk about here today, and this is this little subject that is very widely spoken about at times in America, and it's called divorce.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the reason I want to talk about it, maybe to start to talk about this, and then to maybe continue on it at some other levels, is what I get to meet is people coming in either, again, one or two different types of scenarios, but the two main ones are coming in is where people are saying, like, when is it okay for me to get a divorce? Like, I hate this asshole, and it's like, it's done. Or, I think I'm ready to go, is one type of person. And then another person says, like, when do you know? It's like, I'm so, like, when do you know? And so, and then, so at both stages, the sex is finished. There's nothing much happening. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of arguing. One person, that's their intimacy. That's how they've learned to relate. So that just feels like the norm. And the other one has had enough. And that sort of discourse doesn't work anymore for them. And they wanted to have sort of have a divorce. And I'm curious, in your work, I know they're coming in for so many different things around the relationship. And is this something that you meet often in the clinical space, where people eventually, are on one hand brave enough, because sometimes are really fearful of divorce as well, because it's really seen as the F word, like a failure.
Failure, right? Yeah. Well, you've said a lot there. I think people have to get honest with themselves and ask themselves, have I done everything I can? Is my partner responding to the moves I make? Is this now destructive to me and that person? Sometimes divorcing is an act of compassion for both parties, like letting each other go because we're making each other miserable. One of the answers to your question is John Gottman many years ago talked about the four horsemen that are sort of ringing the death knell for a marriage. And they are criticism, contempt, and contempt is a nasty soup of anger and disgust. Like if you really have contempt for your partner, defensiveness and stonewalling. So he calls those the four horsemen of, kind of the death of a relationship, of the apocalypse. I think that's what he called it. That's when it becomes apocalyptic in a relationship. And
how would you describe stonewalling to our guests?
Well, anytime, if I say to my partner, look, we really need to talk about our relationship, or I'm stuck here, I don't know where to go, and I just get nothing back. There's no conversation. I don't want to talk about that. You always bring that up. You're too sensitive. There's just no conversation. There's no way to talk about anything. I'm just left with a wall in front of me. At what point am I going to just keep scratching at it until my nails are bleeding, as opposed to turn away and say, okay, he's not interested in me. This isn't going anywhere. What am I going to do now? And I have this untested theory that I think people stay in relationships way past their due date because they know the pain of the bickering and the contempt and the criticism, and they engage in it. It's like scratching an itch until it bleeds, because it's less painful than the pain of me facing my life and saying, what am I going to do? We're in debt. I don't have a place to live. I have no idea what it's like to be on my own because I've been in this marriage for 10, 15 years. I'm scared. And so it's easier for me to stay here. It becomes a little bit like Stockholm syndrome, where you stay in the presence of the abuser because at least you got, 2 hot meals and a cot to sleep on. And I may be in my car or couch surfing and not know where I'm going to end up. And that goes back to where we started this conversation with the mystery of life. If you jump off the cliff, you will sprout wings and you'll fly. But it's the terror of not jumping that keeps us in our own personal hell. And then we blame our partner for it. He's doing this to me. It's like, no, he's not. Unless he's got a gun to your head, you're there voluntarily. But the truth is you're too afraid to leave. So you would rather bitch and complain and be engaged in this toxic relationship. Yeah. So that's what stonewalling is. We all know what defensiveness is. And we also know what criticism is.
Yeah, and just another, and would you say that contempt is just another form of being really nasty and sort of?
Well, it's really being disgusted with the other person. And that's a horrible feeling, to feel like you're disgusting or you're an idiot or you can't ever say anything right. Or you just don't want me around. And somebody's got to ask themselves, why would I stay in the face of that? Oh, because that's how my father treated my mother, and that's the household I grew up in. And, we got very good at just ignoring it or dissociating. And
yeah, I had a woman turn around and she said something, I think the man that you just think there was criticism, there definitely was contempt. There definitely was stonewalled, and that there was definitely defense. And she says, well, I have learned something that my mother taught me that I think is very, very, very good to deal with life and to deal with this. And I says, what's that? She says, it's a little thing called tolerance.
Oh, my.
And I says, it was, and she was so proud of this.
Convicted, yeah.
Yeah, and she was of the way I spoke like her. She was she wasn't Elizabethan, but she was well-to-do, and she was older in her 60s, but she was really suffering with this.
Yeah, right. And that is it. That's the stiff upper lip. You suck it up, especially as a woman. You don't make waves. That's just how men are. You just have to put up with that. You're lucky he doesn't beat you. He just talks to you in this really shitty way. Right?
Yeah,
These are all bad messages. So I think that's a good question also, Nigel. What am I tolerating in this relationship? And
I tolerate it.
yeah,
And yeah, and it, the woman had lots of inflammation in her body, and
mm,
and I says, well, the tolerance seems to be inflaming you.
yeah,
I think it was obvious. I'm also a naturopath as well. I've retired, but
I
I
see.
can still, I can still see it.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, it's like she says, so what do you want me to do between sessions? And I says, well, could you just look and maybe note down in your diary the things that inflame you?
Mm,
If you allowed yourself to say to be honest about what actually inflames you in your
yeah,
day-to-day life with your partner.
right. If you weren't tolerating, what would you be
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. So, but yeah, this is powerful. This is powerful stuff, and I would love to. Let's, we can definitely continue on again on this.
I want to add that Catherine Woodward Thomas wrote a book called Conscious Uncoupling. And
Mm,
it's a really beautiful book. It positions divorce in a very different way. And she talks about where the happily ever after story came from and why we feel like failures and what's in the best interest of the children. That whole book is about how to divorce in the best interest of your children, not weaponizing the children, like how to be decent human beings as you honor why you came together, that you had these beautiful children, and how do you honor separating in a way that creates some stability for everybody so that you're not enemies.
yeah, yeah. I tell you one thing, definitely to parents out there who are thinking about, divorcing, um, do get help with that.
Hmm.
Um, do you see some therapists, either a couple therapist or individual therapist? Because some of the most painful things I see is when one parent divorces the children as well,
Yeah,
and
it's awful.
the pain of that, due to I think the parent not doing it consciously, just being in their own pain and unable to make sense of it, just in the child place, and it's just like if just everything is feeling like an attack. So, but yeah, so if you're feeling like well, pretty much any of the subjects that we're talking about here, I think whether you're in a relationship and there's money problems, or whether there's dishonesty in the relationship, or whether there's struggles in the bedroom, communication is so important. Coming to speak to a therapist, reaching out to the doctor, all her contacts are here in the feed below. It's really important that you get help. And as I say this every week, we can't do this thing called life by ourselves, and we really need people, and we need people sometimes who know more than what we do, and that's what helps us grow. And yeah, going to see a therapist doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's they can look out for you in ways that you can't look out for yourself maybe at the beginning. And is there any wise words you would like to share with us, Doc, in relation to this reaching out for support?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it all. I mean, therapists, we're here to help. We're here to support. We're here to reflect back to you what we're hearing. And that can always often help us come out of our own self-deception, the way we're kidding ourselves. And often those are very thin veils. It doesn't take a lot of work for someone to say, do you really believe that? Or why are you tolerating that? Um, just having a friendly other, a trusted other, makes a huge difference in your journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to just to have someone there to really learn that. It's to challenge some of those old beliefs that are maybe outdated, and some of those things that you can't see and that you can be helped to see more clearly, and yeah, where you can have a safe space to feel as well, and like this space today, you can see what a nice conversation can help you develop and open your mind as well as possibly open your heart. And I tend to open my mind and open my heart every
Mhm.
time I sit with you, Doctor.
Yeah, me too.
So thank you for this wonderful gift, and for anybody watching, please share it to anyone who you think might find this of some benefit, and hit a little like or a share, or put in a comment, and comment in any of the feeds if you would like to have a question answered for next month when the doctor's back in again. So take care, everybody. Reach out, and and if you need support, do reach out to us or to the doc here or any therapist in your local area. So thank you again, and have a great weekend, everybody. And thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.